Lisa, did there come a time where Andy Thomas decided that he wanted to go forward with a prosecution of judges and certain county supervisors, and how did you get involved in it?
Well, there was never really a plan to go after anybody. What happened was that there were investigations that I was not involved in that raised some concerns about Don Stapley's disclosure forms, and that was one of the first things that I ever heard about. He failed to disclose a lot of business dealings, and it turned out there were good reasons for that, and I could talk about that a little bit. But what happened was Mr. Thomas had an assistant look at Don Stapley's financial disclosures after this became known to him, and he saw that yes, in fact, a lot of things were not disclosed. What he did is he called me and he said, look, I don't know if a crime has been committed or not, or if this was just an accident, but could you please start looking into this and see? And if there is something that indicates criminal activity occurred, we need to get it to the sheriff's office to investigate. And so that's exactly what I did. At no point had there been any type of criminal investigation or any decision that he had even committed any crime at that point. So I basically started looking at public records and found that there were different land parcels and different payments that were coming in from Conley Wolfswinkel, who was a convicted felon, and they were going to Don Stapley, and they were not disclosed on his taxes, they were not disclosed on his financial disclosures, and in fact we later determined that he was getting about $15,000 a month from Conley Wolfswinkel, simply as an option to purchase land back. And he never paid a cent in taxes on that because he put down on his corporate documents that it was a loan to the shareholder.
So in other words, he was concealing income that he should have reported.
Absolutely.
Now, what about the judges that were revealed to be corrupt or that you indicted? Can you explain a little bit to the average person, what does that mean?
After Don Stapley was indicted, we also found out that there were questions about the court tower because Judge Mundell told one of the sheriff's Chief Deputy Hendershot, that Don Stapley had come to her and told her that if you want the court tower built, you have to hire Thomas Irvin, who was an attorney. So Thomas Irvin was hired as a space planner, and he and his firm were paid over $1 million just to consult about the court.
So that's not doing anything. They just gave their opinion about something.
Pretty much. They were a space planner, which no one in the county even understood why he was there, why he was in meetings. In fact, I went to a meeting once when there were about 30 consultants and about 3 county employees. We had situations like furniture that was a contract that was given to a private company for several $100,000 when the county already had people that dealt with furniture. So there were a lot of different issues that basically caused concern. So we did what any prosecutor would normally do when they're concerned about a case. We started a grand jury investigation. Now, a grand jury investigation does not mean that necessarily a crime has occurred. What a grand jury investigation is, it's done in secret so that you don't basically muddy the name of someone if they didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
So we issued a grand jury subpoena to the county and the county management to try to get the records for the court tower, a lot of which should have been public record, or all of which should have been public record. But that's when immediately the backlash started.
What form did the backlash take? Just briefly, can you kind of hit the high points for us?
Well, even though Tom Irvin was basically the person that we were looking at, why is he getting this money to be a space planner, the county went and hired him and his partner Ed Novak to challenge the grand jury subpoena, basically into them.
So that seems a little incestuous to me. He's the person who's being investigated, and then he gets hired to investigate his own investigation?
Well, it gets even more odd because what happened is they filed a motion to quash or request to quash the grand jury subpoena, and they filed it with the criminal court. Now, in Maricopa County, they were the people that were getting the services of Tom Irvin, Ed Novak, and the county. They were getting their court tower. That case should have never been heard by anyone in the Maricopa County Superior Court. In fact, we asked it to be sent to another court. But that's when Gary Donahoe got involved. And not only did he say that...
Now, isn't Gary Donahoe a judge in Maricopa County?
Gary Donahoe became the criminal presiding judge soon after all this started happening.
Okay.
And we asked him to send this to another county to be dealt with because it was clear that the court had a conflict of interest. Their space planner was now appearing in front of them, asking them to stop an investigation into their relationship. It's funny, but it was like the Twilight Zone, and it seemed pretty obvious to anybody.
Wow. So eventually this got to a point where there was so much friction between yourself and Andy Thomas, and I guess Rachel Alexander as well, who was only an employee just like you were, that what the bar did an investigation of all three of you in an attempt to pull your licenses. Now who encouraged that, and how did that get started? Can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Well, I wish I knew, because there was never a bar complaint that was filed.
Nobody filed a complaint?
Nobody filed a complaint.
Aren't the rules that somebody's supposed to file a complaint
They're
first?
supposed to, but the bar decided on their own, after Judge Leonardo found there was a conflict, that they were going to start an investigation. But they felt they had a conflict of interest, so they asked Rebecca Birch, who was the Supreme Court Justice, to appoint somebody else. And she decided to appoint someone from out of state. That was after a local person was appointed that had already represented both Andrew Thomas and myself in the only prior bar complaint I ever received from a defendant in my 20-plus years as a lawyer.
Who was that? Who was the local person?
His name is Scott Rhodes, and he represents a lot of people in ethical matters, and it was clear that he had a conflict because he had represented Andy very recently, and he had represented me several years prior. But he didn't feel he had a conflict, so he didn't recuse himself. It was Rebecca Birch who finally said, okay, I'm going to appoint somebody else.
So what happened is then you were forced to go through some kind of, I would call it a three-man tribunal. It wasn't really a trial, was it? It was more like a military tribunal.
It was more like a witch hunt, I would say.
Okay, and when you and Andy Thomas and Rachel Alexander were going through that, tell me a little bit about, did they respect your rights to due process? Did they follow the rules of evidence as would normally happen in any kind of civil or criminal action in a court of law?
Absolutely not. It appeared to me that everything was decided before it even started. The judge had no respect for me. Even though he heard my case for months, he could never pronounce my name. Even when he was disbarring me, he couldn't pronounce my name. He had been involved in one of the original underlying criminal cases against Gary Donahoe, and he had ruled against us. He also oversaw a grand jury investigation into me on the very same issues that he denied ever being involved in. And I gave the Arizona Supreme Court a copy of the minute entry showing he was the assigned judge. So basically, he lied in the pleading, and the Supreme Court did nothing. They didn't even address that in my bar matter.
Well, wasn't that Judge William O'Neill, isn't he also friendly with some of the people that you were prosecuting?
Oh, well, as far as we know, he was a friend of Gary Donahoe's because he told Martin Dixon in Pinal County that he was angry that we were going after his friend, Gary Donahoe, and who do we think we were? And then after that, he got appointed to oversee our case. So he also had a personal bias and a personal motive.
So now, didn't he call you Ms. Aubuchon during the trial?
He pronounced my name so many different ways. He never obviously made any effort to find out how to even pronounce my name, even though he heard it day after day by different witnesses and my attorney.
What's the correct way to pronounce your last name?
It's Aubuchon.
Aubuchon. It's not Aubuchon, it's Aubuchon.
Aubuchon because it's French, correct.
Okay. So